Hi, my name's Andy. I've been a Christian for 28 years. I've always attended the Potters House Christian Centre here in Norwich. I've been asked to give you a little bit of a testimony of how I became a Christian. And I grew up in a little village actually called Standon in Hertfordshire. My mum and dad always lived in Hertfordshire. In the 70s and mid 80s, I just remember a great time growing up. I suppose just filled with, memories really of hot summers, crawling about in hay fields, getting into trouble with a farmer. And it was great. Just a great beginning to life, really. Had very stable family life. My mum and dad, they loved each other and they were faithful to each other. I remember just great Christmases, brilliant, great Christmas presents. We always had a family holiday once a year. We'd come up to Norfolk actually. And I always remember you never really influenced by drugs or alcohol. There was nothing like that, going on in our village. I think perhaps the biggest influence, in a sense, to me, in my early teenage life was probably a teacher called John Hopkins, who always sort of told me stories about his army life and traveling and different countries he'd worked abroad in, and that very much sowed a seed in my life. Anyway, when I was 18, 19 years old, my mum and dad moved up to Norfolk, and obviously I moved up here as well with them. I began training as a traditional boat builder and moved into that trade and had a job for a couple of years in a boatyard, but very quickly got bored. And I remember going out running with a friend, and he sort of suggested, Andy, why don't we travel around the world? So we didn't spend long saving, but we spent a couple of months after we got a few grand together, just traveling the world, visiting all sorts of countries, had a great time. I remember coming back to England and very soon, going back to work, just once again, just very bored with that sort of life, just drudgery of work every day, And so I remember thinking, I'm gonna move abroad and live abroad and perhaps, work abroad, see what happens. I remember when I was at college, I saw a poster for voluntary service overseas and got in contact with them, had an interview and was accepted, and ended up going to Sierra Leone in West Africa. And that was great. Just really enjoyed myself there. But I remember one day just sitting on my veranda. I was looking across at the palm trees and, the grasslands, and just thinking about my life, just weighing things up and just thinking, what? I haven't got what it takes to make a success of life. And I looked at my mum and dad, and particularly my dad, who worked a job faithfully for 20 years, same place every day, going in and, to work, coming home. And I thought, what, if I was ever going to have a family and my own house and mortgage and bill, be able to buy things and pay bills, I remember I was going to have to do something about my work ethic. It's no good running away and traveling. And I remember praying. At that point in time, I was looking at the creation around me, and I didn't realise, but I was responding to what, to God's creation, in Romans chapter 1, it says that the creation of God shows visibly the attributes of God. And I didn't realize that's what I was responding to. And I simply prayed and said, God, if you're real, if I'm a sinner, forgive me. Lord, you have to change me. I got really honest in this prayer and asked Jesus if he could come into my life and forgive me of my sin. If he could make me to be a man that worked a job like my dad had done. If he could help me so I could provide for a family, get my own home. If he could help me and change me, then I wanted to know him. I didn't want to be religious. I didn't want to, and I was praying. I said, God, if you spoke to Moses, speak to me. I don't want to be a Christian going to a church that's filled with cold pews, but I want to know you personally. Soon after this prayer, 2 weeks later actually, I was involved in a river accident. I had two friends in the water. They were taken by the current. They were quickly taken out of their depth, and I could see they were both panicking. I couldn't get close to Chris, but I dived into the water and I thought, maybe I can help Mike. And I remember just doing my best to help this man. He's really struggling, and he kept on just pushing me under the water, and I kept on coming up to the surface, just trying to help him the best I could. And I remember going under the water. He's pushing me down 2 or 3 times, but I remember the 3rd or 4th time coming to the surface, and he'd just disappeared. My friend also, Chris, he disappeared. They, both drowned. And I remember then turning and just swimming for my life, just literally just swimming. And I realised at that point I was very tired. I was exhausted. And I remember just under my breath, just praying, just Jesus, if you are alive, if you are real, just whispering these words literally, please help me. Please, God, I don't want to die. And at that point, that specific moment in the water, I remember looking up, and this man on the bank, he saw me. At that specific time I prayed, he leapt into the water, he ran to me and dragged me out. I remember coming back to England just for some rest and recuperation. I remember I was just depressed, and I ended up going back to Sierra Leone again for another 6 months, but came back to England and just didn't know what to do with myself. A friend kept on challenging me, why don't you go to college? Learn something else, learn another skill. And so I ended up going to college and studying furniture construction and design. I remember there on this course there was a born-again Christian, and he kept on talking to me about God and his church, the Potters House that he was going to, and just everything he said seemed to connect with me. And I just remember making a decision, I was going to go to church. And he invited me along one Thursday evening when we had the services then. And I remember going to the service, and there were people they just seemed genuinely happy, lifting their hands in worship and smiling. And I thought, you know what, God, if you are anywhere, you've got to be here. And I remember responding to the altar call, asking Jesus into my life, and I knew at that moment, Jesus was real. He had forgiven me, washed my sins, and I just knew, man, I had a peace. And from that moment on, 28 years now, I've been married. Well, actually, this coming Tuesday, the 5th of May, 2020, been married 25 years. Have a lovely wife, 3 kids, dog, 2 rabbits, and 2 homes. And all the way through my life, my married life, my Christian life, God's shown himself to be faithful. I'm sure as you watch this video, you have your problems, you have your issues, there's life deals, there's good times and bad times. But I just encourage you, just pray. The Bible says, there's no other name under heaven by which we must be saved. Jesus can save us from our sin that causes us to make stupid decisions, crazy mistakes, sin that ultimately will divide us for eternity from God. But Jesus can come into our hearts. He can forgive us. I just want to encourage you. Jesus really can change your life. Why don't you pray tonight? Just in the quiet of your own heart, your own life, your own room. Just as I did. Just test God. Jesus, are you alive? You won't be disappointed. God bless you.